how do you even start with a system like that? Like, how do you even come up with that? Is this something you've picked up throughout your years? Does it change? Is this something you got from someone else?
So much of this was about how do you objectify information that seems subjective? How do you ask the questions so that you get the truest form of the data answer that you need? How do you score things so that there's not a lot of variation between the people scoring it? Because like I always give the example of answering a phone at an office. You could have 20 people, or let's say you have 5 people in a meeting and go, how should we have our receptionist answer the phone? And you'll get 5 different answers. And it's based on 5 different levels of training and experience. And some of them may all, 3 or 4 of them may all make sense, but it depends on what it is that you're looking for that you do that with. And you got to find what's best for your company. So a lot of what I was doing was creating processes that would reduce variation and be very specific to help you get really good data. And when I started applying it to scouting rookies, I mean, I didn't have as much knowledge about techniques for the positions that I was studying. I didn't have as much knowledge about defenses. I didn't have as much knowledge about scouting itself. So it's evolved a massive amount since 2005 when I started doing it for the first time and publishing my first one in 2006. But the framework for how I create how I create everything has stayed the same, because the whole intent was you're developing as you go. It's about continuous improvement. And so the structure in terms of how I phrase things in a yes or no format, that I have a scoring value for each thing, that everything is defined, because if you don't follow it by how you define it, then you're not going to figure out what it is that you need to change. And
Right.
and also then the scoring isn't consistent from player to player or from rep to rep. So I write everything down that I score and have a framework for that. And while that's evolved, because okay, then now scouts who bought my book is like, this is good, but these are some books you might really like. So go read Jay Norvell's book on wide receiver play, because he worked with Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne and all those, and Torrey Holt and all those guys, and you'll learn a lot from that. Or go watch, or 8 years ago I watched Drew Lieberman, who is a guy on YouTube you can go watch. He lives in Atlanta now near me, but he was a coach at Rutgers and before that at Wesleyan, and he's coached guys like Dontavian Wicks and Julian Edelman and a lot of the top tight ends and a lot of good receivers in the past and the present. And he does a YouTube channel where you can see all the techniques that he teaches and coaches people on. And literally the RSP that I use now, I mean, the framework for how to put it into the scoring system to make the data worthwhile and to make the scoring worthwhile is what I learned and translated from what I learned from the system. But like the criteria is either gone through me watching more film and talking with coaches and talking with players, or taking, like I took Drew stuff and it used to be all over my board for about 3 years. And I literally applied that and even his terminology with how he talks about like certain types of release moves, I use the same terms, and just put it into a scoring system. So it's evolved a lot, and then like even now that I have 2 different types of scoring, because the original scoring I had was how I graded players. But then I realized what it was doing was asking, can this player do the thing that I'm saying in terms of the basic criteria? And if the answer was yes, and they had a high score, well, that's great. But I wasn't measuring as much how well they did it, how well they performed the bare minimum. So it was like, so I kind of wanted to do that. And so I started developing my own system for very specific things within that realm, like how well does the guy that run the route? Because like you could say that he's got 5 release moves that are good, like he's got a double up, or he's got a stick, or he can he can swat a guy and swim over the top of him, and you can say that, oh well, he's got 5 release moves, that's really good. And then you look at him and go, well, There's no nuance to how he does any of those. Like he doesn't understand the rhythmic patience that you need to have to like draw the guy in with one step and then be really sudden with the next step, or that the step he delivers, it doesn't cover a wide range of the field. So he's neither patient and sudden, and he's not that, and he's also not like making the move outside the player's frame and making it believable. So two guys can perform all five of these things to the letter, and you say they end up with that same score. But if you look at how they deliver it, the way Devontae Adams delivers release moves in the red zone is much different than what Trey Harris was doing to begin his career. And suddenly you look at that and you go, oh, it's a whole different world. One knows enough that you can say he could develop into that, and he's got the baseline skill to work with, and that makes him a draftable player and maybe a guy you take on late day 2, early day 3. And Devontae Adams is expressing it in a way like Malik Neighbors was doing it like as at LSU, and you look at that and go, oh, that guy can be dropped into on Sunday and give you 100 yards. I don't care what team it is. You could drop him in right now, and as long as he's not sore from the Saturday game, he could do that technically,
Right.
and it's the same stuff, but it's a world of difference. So I ended up with a scoring that shows how well do they do that.
And it's funny because like I think initially you might think, or people might think, well, yeah, of course you got to know how well they're going to do something, but there's always like different levels of how you're looking at players and what you're looking for. And I remember even just like working as an intern first at Florida International University and trying to like learn from the people that were there. And just in the way an organization works, you don't always get that opportunity. But I remember the first thing that I was taught was, don't worry about if they don't do something perfect. We kind of just need to see if they have the athletic ability, because they're going to get here to college and we're going to coach them. Versus if you're looking at a college prospect going to the NFL making millions, they need to know how to do those things already. And it's about how good they do them, not, is an NFL coach going to take the time to show this guy how to run his route properly? Because probably not. Like there's just going to be all install and getting you ready for next week's game. It's not going to be teaching you how to do those little things that you've had, 8 years of high school and college to do.
Exactly. No, I mean, you nailed it, and that's the thing too, is that also you'll see that players in the league, there's a baseline of like what's good enough for you to get on the field and start. And that baseline is lower than what you might expect, depending on what point of view you come in on. I mean, it's like, we could talk about Malik Neighbors, and then we could talk about a player like Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden is good enough to be on a field and make plays for you. But what role are you putting him in? And what are you expecting him to do? What you're asking T. Higgins to do is different than what you're asking Jamar Chase to do. And so, fantasy people might look at it and go, well, T. Higgins, you put him on the Carolina Panthers and he'd be the number one receiver. And you'd probably say yes, because they'd scheme it all up the way they did for Tetairoa McMillan, and he wouldn't have to face a lot of man coverage, and he may actually be a borderline wide receiver 1 in that system. But if you took Tetairoa McMillan and asked him to do what Jamar Chase does, you'd have utter failure, because he can't beat the jam. He can't defeat press. Not yet. He might,
Yeah.
but like watch him against AJ Terrell in the only opportunities that he had in Atlanta, and he got shut down. And every time I watched him, he got shut down in that. So, doesn't mean he's a bad player. He's a good wide receiver too in most offenses, and in an offense that needs a guy as a go-to and they can create for him, they can do that. And the same thing with running backs. You could look at Tevin Coleman way back in the day, and you could watch him and go, listen, if you give him an open hole and a good running start and say, this is the only hole you've got to try to hit, and just manipulate that space, man, he might burn you for a 75-yard touchdown. But if you don't have the line up front to do that, like Kyle Shanahan discovered in Atlanta when he tried to do that with Coleman, and the team's like, look, we can't take all these losses and him trying to reverse field and do stuff because he only knows how to hit one hole. We need you to put Devonta into the game, because Devonta is at least he's going to be able to create behind the line of scrimmage and be able to do things that he might not get as 75-yard runs, but he's going to give us about 10 carries for 87 yards, and he's still going to have another 15 carries in him if we needed him for that many. And he's going to be a league leader in rushing, during that time because we're good enough. It's different styles of play. And sometimes the positions have that wide of a range of what's useful. And that's what makes it confusing for people because people who aren't scouting, they want definitive answers. I understand that. And the big box media environments are also influenced to give definitive, easy answers because they don't, the amount of time I've taken to just discuss this, we would have gone to 2 commercial breaks and I'd be fired. And, and I wouldn't even be on air in the first place with the beard I got. I don't have Alfredo's hairstyle and I could,
Oh God.
I've still got a little bit more weight to lose, but it's like, those are the things that it's just different. Football's a very nuanced game, but football media is a very definitive kind of thing that's entertainment. And so it's an interesting like dichotomy that creates a lot of conflict because the more you get into the game and the more you see the details, the more you want to go, who are these people talking? And then but you don't realize that those people probably were talking about stuff the way you and I are right now with detail that got them that job. But now the producers and the demographic studies and the marketing is all like, listen, you don't have that time, and we'd rather you get clicks and say something stupid. And in fact, if you want to invent something stupid or controversial, go ahead and do it because you might get more clicks. And you're only on a 2-year contract, so I mean, it's got its pros and cons. So I mean, it's not. Don't blame them all the time when you see some of the stuff that they say. They're just playing the game because that's the
Mm-hmm.
game that's there.
Man, it's funny because like what you said earlier is we have to take something that is subjective and make it objective for people, and that's where I kind of saw a gap in content, and specifically not just fantasy football but now doing some scouting stuff where it's like, okay, rather than just like these are the rankings, these are the good players, bad players, it's like what goes into that, because kind of how you said it even with the T Higgins thing is there's just flavors of what players are good at, and there's got to be more nuance to it, and we could really dive into nuance of all that stuff. But
Yeah.
uh, what you've been talking about is like kind of, it feels like you have picked up so many things along the way, right? And just now, right? Like you have the RSP cast, you work with so many smart people and brilliant minds in the industry. I'm so happy to say this because this is now officially going to be my first F bomb on air for Pretend GM. You've got Feel It or Fuck It with Bob Harris. Thank you, everybody. I'll hold for applause. Going Deep with with Brandon Angelo. You got the RSP Film and Theory with Adam Harstad. Like you've got so many smart people you have worked with. I don't need you to pick like a person, but has there been something, just something that you even live by when doing scouting, or something you have picked up on in your processes from someone else that you say, this is the favorite thing I have learned in my career?
Wow. I mean, I've learned so much from so many different people, whether it's, Bob Brandon or Adam or Dwayne McFarland when he used to do stuff with me, or Eric Stoner, who was way back in the
Yep.
day when he had Draft Mecca, and Eric worked with me as well, or Jay, um, Jay Moyer, who's a football coach out in San Francisco, who did a lot of stuff there as well. I think that, from Bob, I think from a fantasy perspective, maybe not as much a scouting perspective, but from a fantasy perspective, I've worked for Bob and, writing for his magazine, the magazines that he edited for 20 years before he and I started doing this. But I think with Bob, probably the fact that he is good at being able to translate news and information into actionable fantasy value, and kind of what narratives to pick and what narratives to kind of how you look at 2 or 3 sources and resolve information. I think that he validated a lot of that for me. That was good with Brandon, I mean, being a trainer of professional athletes who helps rehab them and work with them. 2 things I learned with him that were fascinating from a scouting perspective, I think, is the first episode we ever did. He said, "Let me explain to you why the combine measurements, with how they use their measuring equipment has a huge variation, and how and why that variation can be really damaging and not true to a player, and how they're using an old method anyway that has a wide variation compared to everything else. That blew my mind. I'd never been to the combine, even though I've thought about going, but just that alone got our relationship going because
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, Matt. I'm 6'2". I just got measured at the combine for my license. That's the thing. And it just says 5'10" instead. It just they were a little off.
that's awesome. Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing is that like to realize that the variation could be the difference between 448 and 46,
Yeah.
and you're like, just because of the plus or minus error with the system they use. Wow, so there. And also injury, like he talked about Tony Pollard when he was with the Cowboys, and how, like, look, there's being healthy enough to play, and the coaches want you in there because they know your assignment sound, and they feel like, and also you in name only is going to strike fear in the coordinators to doing things that maybe they otherwise wouldn't do if they knew for sure he was hurt. But there's healthy enough to be on the field, and there's healthy enough to play to the level that you were able to play at before you got hurt. And that really helped in fantasy, because you start to realize, you look at players and go, okay, so maybe Tony Pollard comes back and looks great, and they say in camp that he's looking awesome. And then after about 4 weeks of getting hit on the shins like he's been hit with an aluminum baseball bat 3 or 4 times a game, he's going to slow down because his body's not able to regenerate at the level it was pre-injury, because it spent so much of its bandwidth post-injury rehabbing. So those two are huge takeaways for me. With Adam, obviously, dynasty stuff. Adam's so good with models and looking at, the market and understanding things like, really exploring the values of things like, is it more valuable to have this year's pick, or is it more value to have next year's pick? And when should you be trading for picks? Should you be trading while the draft is going on, or should you be trading before the draft? And so he's been really good at being able to explore that kind of information, which I think has been helpful for me as a fantasy scout, um, because I can take the football information that I'm looking at and then be able to say, okay, now that I've told you how good this guy is, the fantasy lens is most likely going to be, realistically, this guy's going to get drafted in the second round. Um, and he's not going to be seen as an instant starter. There are going to be a lot of doubts about him here. Here are the ways that you can approach this that will get you the most profit or the most value out of what you're doing. So, I mean, those three guys, they're incredibly intelligent people that I'm really fortunate to be able to get to work with. Um, and I've learned a ton from them, from the fantasy sphere, or in Brandon's case too, from, some more context with scouting that helps me go look at things and go, if I see this on the field and I think this guy's fast enough and he doesn't run a great time, I'm not losing my mind over that. And I've never really did, but like, I have a lower baseline for like, I have a baseline for like what's fast enough or what's quick enough. And I've always been a believer that the baseline is more important than fast or better. Because if you want a great example of that this year, and people will probably be hateful about it, but it's Ramondre Stevenson. You look at Ramondre Stevenson, and while he fumbled a ton and that hurt him and he got hurt, but you look at him and he would never be confused to being in the same planet as Travion Henderson in terms of speed, but in terms of what he does in the red zone, what he does in terms of contact balance, his ability to catch the football out of the backfield, his ability to create on plays that aren't just gap plays where it's the Tevin Coleman hit this one hole meet and go as fast as you can. That's Travion Henderson. He's very good on gap plays. But when you ask him to do more diverse work, which an offense would like to do, they don't just want to be like one speed all the time, which is why when you look at Trevion's stats, it's like, well, he got there and he got the results. Fantasy people, that's all we care. Just give him more carries. But are they actually going to play when they actually start playing good teams? Because New England's schedule wasn't all that great. When they start playing good teams, and he's just a one speed guy, they're worried about that. They're thinking about those things. Mike Vrabel's going, look, I've faced guys who just run gap, and I face guys who can do zone and gap. I'd much rather just face the predictable guy, you know? And I
Yeah.
think that that's why when you look at Ramondre, you know, he was never fast, but he's a really good back. And that's why there's like probably going to be a split there. But it's like, those are things that you kind of learn so that when you're studying a player and people go, oh, he's slow as molasses, and then I look at the number and I go, it's fast enough. He's got value. I don't care what people think. So you start, that context helps. And so when someone like Brandon comes along and goes, we don't really know what, I mean, you may not really know for sure what this guy ran unless we put an RFID tracker on him in a manner that's different than what you're going to see with some of the stats tracking services that provide um, film views for film access to us, and they show the mile per hour thing, but they're
Hmm.
not using the one that's most accurate. So it's kind of like, even then, at the end of the day, so when I hear people go, I love speed, and I joke around a lot with Bob that he's like, that if Bob loves speed so much that, that really all those magazines he's got in the background of his TV, of his podcast, little setting, they're all centerfolds of like speedy people, and that he's like,
Yep.
he's obsessed with this. He's upset, and he
He's
loves
got
to joke
John
around with
Ross
me
back
about it.
there,
Yes,
Darius Hayward Bay.
yes, yes. I joke that Cecil used to motorboat the centerfolds of like big strong running backs back in the day when we were on the Audible, and Gene literally got me a T-shirt that says motorboat on it, and it's literally like a boat with a stick figure on it, which I wear occasionally, but I usually don't wear it out in public because I don't want to look like that dude.
Yep.
But
Yep.
but when I've gone to like the Senior Bowl, I've worn that with Cecil, and like he's like, why didn't he get me that shirt? I was like, because I used the term on you and made fun of you. But like with Bob, I joke with that too. It's all speed with Bob.
So you mentioned a lot of stuff here about fantasy and dynasty football and how these things start to overlap. What have you found to be the biggest differences for you? Because sometimes, like, we can say, hey, this guy's a good football player and he should be a second round pick in the NFL draft. And then in the same breath, you could say he's probably not going to be relevant for fantasy football, and there could be a myriad of reasons why. But what have you found to be like the biggest differences for you when you're going through that process, and to try to separate those as best as you can when being an analyst for both sides?
Yeah. I think for me, I came about it interestingly because I never gave round grades when I scouted. So, the scouting system that a lot of people use is adapted after the NFL system. And the one thing I'll say, and I want to make sure I'm really clear about this, is that, when I first started getting feedback from people from within the NFL who were analytics people, who were former players, who were scouts, who did all three in some cases, had like, really high levels of expertise. I remember them saying to me, listen, I need you to know, I thought you were in the league at first because of the things that you understood organizationally. And that kind of blew me away when I found out you weren't, and you could see behind the curtain stuff that a lot of the media people would say, and the media people shake their head and go, no, that's not the case. And he's like, no, they don't know. And he said, you get it. A lot of stuff you share. He goes, I'm not saying your scouting is this way. He goes, because this was like 4 years into what I was doing. He goes, your scouting isn't there yet. He goes, you still got things to learn. He goes, but your process is light years ahead of what the NFL is doing. So I never decided, and I'm sharing that because at that point, when you get that kind of feedback from someone and they start showing you scouting reports of like Russell Wilson from a specific team, and you look at this and go, okay, I'm on the right track because this
Yeah.
is garbage. Okay. Like some of the stuff was like 2 paragraphs and it didn't say anything. And, so when you learn that, you go, my system's fine if I stay true to it. But what their system was, from back since like the 50s and 60s from the services, is let's give a round grade. And there's so much variation in that. If you worked in corporate America for any length of time where you had an employee evaluation, you know the rule. It's like, it's usually a 1 through 5 or 1 through 10, but it's usually 1 through 5 or 1 through 7. And usually 1 is you're going to get fired. So you're probably not even going to get a 1. You're probably fired before that even happens. A 2 is you're probably on the way out and you're getting a performance plan coming anyhow. A 3 is like what everyone's getting who isn't going to get promoted. And you might have deserved a 4, You might even deserve the 2, and you may look at your peers, and if you knew each other's scores, you probably look at that guy and go, "How did he get a 3? He deserved a
Right.
2. I got a 3. I deserved a 4." So that's the hedge area. That's like the fourth round grade for scouts who go, I know my GM doesn't like him. So, but I think he's really good. So I'm going to give him a fourth round grade. Or I think he's really good. Or I don't think he's very good, but everyone else thinks he's good. So I'm going to bring it up to a fourth round grade. That's the 3 in grading. And then if you get a 4,
Hmm.
you're probably in line for a promotion sometime. If you get a 5, they're probably promoting and giving you a bonus. And this was already like in the works, you know? So there's so much variation on what is a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. There's nothing written down about that. So when I start looking at scouting for for fantasy football, what's how this ties in is that when I see round grades, what that helps me see is how the teams view the player, not how talented they are.
Hmm.
So then that way I can stop caring about where I rank the player based on what I think how successful he's going to be, but based on how successful he should be if he gets a chance. And there's a difference because like I could have rated Traylon Burks super. I don't know where I put him, but I know I was lower than most people. I could
Same.
have put Traylon or Zach Wilson. That's another example. I could have put one of those guys, I could have put them super high and said, you need to take him in your top 5 picks because look at the draft capital that they have. Instead, I can go, I don't give a rat's ass about draft capital. I care about talent. Now, we may not see whether I was right or wrong about that talent based on the opportunity they're getting, but I'm going to stick with my guns. Kyle Monangai, perfect example. I think you probably, if you saw my rankings at where we were, so like, you could saw that I had them higher than anybody, and it was like inordinately high, like probably like top 60, or top 80, like of players, because I thought this guy's going to get to play. He was a
Yeah.
seventh round, sixth or seventh round pick. That doesn't. If you follow draft capital, there's no way he's going to play. But if you follow talent, I go, if this guy blocked better, he would have been one of my top 5 backs in this class in terms of the talent level. So what it allows me to do is to think independently, but use the system against itself to kind of go, all right, here's how, here's how everyone in the world is going to look at this because they're trying to aspire to be in line with the NFL. I'm not trying to be in line with the NFL. I'm trying to study talent. They're trying to study whether it's worthwhile giving this guy a big contract and
Hmm.
guaranteeing that he's going to get playing time. So I'm going to share you that. I'm going to share you what I think of him, but then I'm going to give you the lens of where this is going to play out for you. So I may look at somebody and go, Skylar Thompson, back in 2022, I had him rated as my first quarterback overall. I had, and I said, I know this is probably an anomaly, but like he'll probably have a longer career than guys like Ritter. He'll probably have a longer, might have a better opportunity than even a guy like Pickett. Um, but, or like Brock Purdy, I gave him a high
It was like
grade, like a
QB
high.
six or something
Yeah,
like
he was
that.
QB
Yeah.
6, and he had. If you score over 75 in my system, you have a chance to become a starter. And so this is a guy within a couple years could become a starter, probably a good journeyman starter. But if he fits in the right system, which is like I said, a Shanahan kind of Stefanski kind of system, he could possibly start and be good. Well, you know, I wasn't telling you to pick the guy in the first round, but I can tell you and say, well, if he lands on a team that fits the system and he does these things, you might want to, every summer pick him up on your dynasty roster and hold on to him. So these are things that I think how that's helped me is that, and then there's just certain skills that I think that you look at and you look at from a football scouting standpoint and go, I don't care how much hype this guy's getting, he can't do these things well, and that's going to limit him from getting to that level. So like, and I might be wrong about the player, but like Tetairoa McMillan is a perfect example to me. I look at that and go, I know that press coverage isn't the main method of covering wide receivers in the NFL, but it is the difference between what Justin Jefferson and AJ Brown and Jamar Chase and Devontae Adams can do that made them top number one receivers, or Stephon Diggs in his prime could do, and what guys like T. Higgins doesn't do. T. Higgins gets covered one on one by Grant Delpit in the safety spot and is ineffective, you know. But Jamar Chase can have the top cornerback in the league covering him on 3rd and 16, and they're still going to throw it to him, and more often than not, he's going to make a play. So these are things that I can look at and go, these are the lines that I'm drawing and going. Tet McMillan, really good number 2 receiver, and I'm good with that. Or Tyler Warren and Colston Love, and I can look at them from a football perspective and go, Colston Loveland can run routes. He can run timing routes. He can stick his foot in the ground and drop his weight and come back to someone. And he can run those timing routes against cornerbacks because he's so big and tall that he doesn't have to be super fast. He's just quick enough to do it and win. But then if he's facing a bigger guy and runs those routes, he's quicker and faster than them. Tyler Warren, when I watch him, I go, he's Tucker Kraft. Get him schemed open within a space of, into an open space, and there's not going to be a defender within 5 to 10 yards of him, and he's going to make like the bully he is and run over people, and that's great. And occasionally you can throw him a go get it ball in a zone where someone's going to be tight to him by the time the ball arrives, and he'll out muscle them, out leap them for the ball. You're going to get production out of that. But when I go on, Twitter or X midseason and go, I still like Colston Loveland as my tight end one, and Tyler Warren is a guy that's going to get early returns for you, but it may not last unless the dynamics are perfect in that offense that he's in. And so far they've been, yeah, I'm going to be on the most wanted poster in Indianapolis post offices for a little while, But you look at it and you go, well, what's the truth, and what helped fantasy people? What's helped, if you're in Dynasty right now, I'm sure there's still Colts fans who go, I'd rather have Tyler Warren. But I think if you're clear eyed and you view it, you'd go, Tyler Warren's good, but who's the guy who has the best chance to become a George Kittle or a Travis Kelce out of those two? And it isn't Tyler Warren.
See, and I love that you give that context to things, because I always kind of say like there's just different flavors, but it's like once they actually do get to the NFL, not that the scouting reports go out the window, because they don't. Like they're very much still part of who this player is, but it's really going to matter how they mesh in their environment, and that environment is either going to accentuate their positives and the skills they have, or it's going to stifle them, and it's going to really muffle them throughout their career. And even with a guy like Loveland, where maybe we see it takes a little longer for production to get there, it did not mean that that was a worse player, because then once the production started to show up and the timing was there and the snaps in the field were there, all of a sudden we're saying, why was this guy not on the field? Same thing with Luther Burden. You and I both loved Luther Burden. And I remember just sitting there in like week 7 or 8. I'm just like, can we stop the damn Olamide Zaccheaus experiment? Like I get it. It's a savvy veteran that can do certain things, but can we get Luther Burden out there? And you finally do. And it's just, that's why I always say, like, it is flavors. There are flavors to players and how they mesh with that team. And
I'll give one more if you don't mind, real
yeah,
quick. I had a scout write me about this. I had a really high grade for Sam Laporta, and so when Laporta came out, I wrote in my report, and he wrote me when he read it, and it made him laugh. He goes, "This is so true, and this is what reporters don't understand." And I go, and what I wrote for fantasy GMs was, look, Laporta's a guy that could end up having a really strong fantasy fit because of what he does if he gets drafted by the right team that knows how to use him. But he's that type of tweener that you could see a team drafting him and the GM wanting him and the coach going, I told you I wanted a big tight end. And so what he's going to try and do just to prove his point is he's going to fatten up Laporta by making him like gain more muscle and more weight, and now he's not going to be effective, and he's going to be playing on special teams.
yeah.
And the coach is going to turn to the GM and go, see, didn't you should have listened to me when I told you. Like, they're going to literally like ruin the player to prove the point. And I wrote that, And it wasn't because I knew football. It was because I knew how dysfunctional management environments can be. You know the world. You've seen enough of the world, and literally the football person who has been involved with countless teams. He literally wrote me. He goes, "Dude," he goes, you have no idea how often that exact thing happened. I laughed my ass off when I read that because it's so true. So, and then you look at Harold Fannin. Everyone loved Harold Fannin, and then he ran at the combine. And then I looked at his numbers versus Sam Laporta's and said, it's not much different. He's just got to go to a team that actually values a second tight end. And lo and behold, you saw where he went, and it
Yep.
worked out.
Yeah, it's funny because you try to sit there and I don't know if it's the right thing to do always, but I have found myself doing it where you create these thresholds
Yes.
for players, and like I do think that you need to have that because you can't ignore deficiencies that players have. But do you ever, when let's say a player doesn't cross a certain threshold, like how do you put that into your process, into your scouting? Because sometimes it can be a red flag, and we always hear the term that player's off this team's board for XYZ reason. When you're doing this kind of stuff, I mean, the RSP, you're not going to take a player out of the RSP. You'll probably just
No.
rank them lower, right? Have you found there are certain thresholds that you're like, this to me is a non-negotiable?
I think that what happens is I look at it in three steps. There's the threshold for can you be on an NFL team with
Mm-hmm.
this level of performance, um, and then how good can you be, moving forward with that. And what I end up looking for, a good example would be um, Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary is small, he's short, he's slow, he doesn't have much acceleration, but he has really great change of direction, quickness, and excellent decision making. Okay. So I would look at him and I go, well, he falls below even my like thresholds that are lower than most for speed and these things. But then I'm looking for compensatory factors. What are compensatory factors that could um, be tip the scales in that player's favor, even though they may lack something? And so for me, things are like if they're short, but they have really strong leaping ability as a receiver, and they have play strength and really strong technique, and they're super quick. If they're slow but have great footwork and they're super quick as a runner, and they understand how to anticipate creases opening, they can play in the league. So I'm looking
Yep.
for things like that. Or a Dalvin Cook, when everyone was like, his spark score was awful. And I go, well, have you seen that he never cuts? Have you noticed that like he never cuts at FSU? Everything's curvy linear movement. Everything's like round like a motorcycle going around a bend,
Yeah.
and he's leaning into it. But he does it at such a fast speed, he doesn't need to cut. So sometimes the way that we score stuff doesn't fit the player. It's kind of like the bias of SATs where you go to certain communities and because they don't have the testing services and the parents got to work all the time and the kids are left to their own devices, they're smart as whips. But but in school they don't have the infrastructure to go through become a little industrialized human being that public schools were designed to do. So when they take the SAT, they bomb it, but if you ask them in life, if you're going to watch them like actually show intelligence in life, their life intelligence is off the charts. So it's the same thing when you're looking at like this stuff. Sometimes you got to look at the scoring method and go, what biases does this scoring method have? What's this designed to do? And is it fitting what the player does? Or is the player succeeding outside of this because he's doing specific things that will translate to success away from the test? And so, like Cook was a good example. Devin Singletary is a good example. But then there's players that you look at and you'll look at like pocket play, and you'll look at a player like um, Zach Wilson, and you'll go, this guy doesn't really understand how to climb a pocket. He doesn't know how to
Right.
really maneuver it. He also doesn't read leverage very well. So he may understand the play conceptually, like how to spit it out on a whiteboard, but um, he's throwing hospital balls, or he's like throwing balls that like There's no every the worst cornerback on the worst NFL team will jump that. It'll be a pick six.
It's
But
like knowing a recipe or how to conceptually cook something, but not actually being able to get on the grill and do it, or like get into the
yes,
kitchen and do it. Right.
yes, that's a perfect example. It's like it's perfect. It's like look, your grandma may be able to make like a soup that's amazing, but she never wrote down the exact measurements of what it is. She pours it in her hand,
So
and if
true.
it's like part in the if it's I had the same kind of grandma, and I've been
It's
around a
always
lot
how
of grandmas.
much
I go,
enough.
how much? It's enough with that, or you taste it, and then
Just grab it in your hand, put that in there, and
yeah,
then you just taste as you go.
yeah, you taste it, and that's exactly it. And then sometimes the recipe's a little different every time, but it's really
Yeah.
good each time. And then and you try to capture that. And whereas someone who wants it exact, there's so many. That's the other thing is like you might be working on a gas burner where everything can be more precise. You might be working on an electric burner that it isn't. You might have a hot plate. I'd rather have the grandma that could cook on a hot plate,
Yeah.
and like find whatever's in the cupboard and make something good than somebody who's got a Wolf stove and Le Creuset cookware, and literally everything's pre-measured out and it's all precise. And and that's the thing is like you got to look at some of this stuff and understand that that some of the things that there are certain things like that you find that don't connote a level of mental toughness, ability to be resilient, an ability to deal with pressure, and to be able to make decisions under pressure. That if they continually fail at those things, like pocket presence and movement, like being able to take a hit and make the catch while you're doing it and using good technique while that happens, or as a running back, always trying to bounce things to the outside, you may look at those and go, okay, these are bigger problems than other things that like, oh, he's not the fastest guy, but then you have to look at that's the other layer is you look at where they get drafted and you go, this coach values fast guys and they drafted a slow guy. Like I learned that with you can learn that and go, oh, the GM wants this guy or the scouting department wanted this guy, and the coach is not going to be having any of that, and then that becomes a problem because you may be like, I rated this guy really high, but it's probably going to be a bad fit because he's going to take one look at him and go, John Lynch, why did you give me this guy? I mean,
Right.
like, for, you could look at you look at the 49ers, perfect example. Like they got Trey Lance, and you could tell John Lynch wanted Trey Lance, and you can tell that the Shanna clan wanted, wanted Mac Jones, and they wound up with Brock Purdy,
Brock
and
Purdy.
and
Nobody got what they wanted, but
nobody,
it worked
yeah.
out.
But what's hilarious is that then you look back on it and you go, oh, it's like the Washington Commanders or Washington Redskins back in the day all over again. They didn't. Daddy Shanahan didn't want Robert Griffin Jr. So he said, "Can I get a second quarterback if you just in case, you know?" And they're like, "Sure, you can have your second quarterback as long as we get Griffin." So then he picked Kirk Cousins. And when you look at the 49ers, they picked Trey Lance, but then when Michael Silver at SI or NFL Network's like going to talk to, I joke and call Mike Shanahan Emperor Palpatine up in this big box out over the stadium,
I
you know.
love it.
Emperor Palpatine up there is all he doesn't want to talk about Trey Lance. All he's talking about is this Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy. He's just talking about all the day,
Yeah.
and I'm going, this is getting telegraphed just like the Washington thing all over again because he's literally like, he's like, let's talk about Brock Purdy and how talented he is, and I'm going, yeah. So like, oh, so if he's Emperor Palpatine, then I guess that makes Kyle Anakin, So like,
Oh God.
but I mean like it's but I mean it's funny because it's like you can see some of those dynamics and so it's not always right, but you're looking for layers, and the way you put those layers of information together can help you decide, okay, I see a guy who like Kenny Pickett who when he's prepared and he knows where the pressure's coming from, he's fine. But the NFL, but when you see games where you see moments where pressure's coming and he doesn't, and a lineman didn't handle it right, and he's surprised, he
Oof.
completely folds.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at a guy like Caleb and you go, yeah, he may run around too much in some of these situations, or he's trying to buy time, but he can, and he still
He
has
almost
his wits
wants
about
that
him.
because he
Yeah.
wants an excuse to do that. He's like, oh, thank God they messed up their blocking assignment.
But you can see who has their wits about him and who doesn't.
Hmm.
And I think, and then there's also just things that learning to learning to ignore what the masses say, because there's a lot of intelligent people out there, but they don't have your process. I don't know what Lance Zerline looks at. I love Lance. He's a good guy, and he understands a lot about players, and he understands about scouting players, but I don't know his methodology any more than he knows mine.
Yeah.
So when he says something that I see, I might go, I might go look at that again just to make sure. And then I go, nope, I saw what I saw. I'm good. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of intelligent people that said that Lamar Jackson couldn't play in the pocket when that's all he was doing. That's all he was doing at Louisville. I mean, he ran and he did scrambled, but he was great in the pocket. And I talked to occasional scouts that I knew, and we talk and they go, I don't know if he's there's some things I have questions about, but one thing's for sure, that dude's a rock in the pocket. And I remember doing a video like where I said, what everyone's saying Lamar Jackson is, they should be saying about Josh Allen. And everything that they're saying Josh Allen is actually what Lamar is. And they both can turn out to be good, but like they're characterizing Lamar as like this dumb as rocks dude who can't like manage a pocket and like goes crazy when the pressure comes and makes all these doofus throws. And I'm going, are they watching Josh Allen tape? Because that's what he was doing early on in his career. And Allen isn't a doofus. He's a smart quarterback. He's done a great job being able to grow into an excellent player. But they're both in the same tier as players. But one was characterized in one way, like he shouldn't even be a quarterback, and the other one was characterized as like something completely different. And I looked at that and go, well, that's people's biases, and that's a whole other story that gets filtered in the scouting, where like the scouts don't see this, but like you hear stories like the I don't remember his name. It bothers me. I don't remember his name, but after you study so many names, you only have so many names left in your bank to remember.
Yeah.
Like I
There's only so much
remembered,
space.
I'm watching Dane Key, the Nebraska wide receiver, last night, so I can't remember the guy who grew up in the Bill Walsh 49ers system because his dad was the main scout there, but he scouted for years and literally almost got into a fist fight with the Rams executive who came downstairs because he wanted all those scouts to change Alex Smith's scouting report because they had a fourth or fifth round grade on him. And after the Tech Schramm or who's the not Tech Schramm, the GM who recently passed away, who was with the Cowboys, who invented the modern scouting system. Um,
Oh.
you know who I'm talking about too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
And now it's escaping my
yeah.
head too.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but
Oh.
like you'll look him up. But
Yep.
he he went off and sang Alex Smith's praises on ESPN and NFL Network. Best workout I saw since Troy Aikman, and he should be a first round number one overall pick. So the exec came in and basically told the scouts, we want you to change your grades, and here we've got new tape for you to watch of Alex Smith. And this was documented in SI, by the way, so it's not just me that is telling this
Okay,
to
so you're
you.
not breaking news
I'm not
here
breaking
on.
news.
Okay.
This was an SI.
Damn it, man. I
I
needed
know.
something for a clip so I can be
know.
like, this is, no one's
Yeah.
ever heard this before.
No, but they might not remember it. So, but the apparent, and I've heard this from three different sources. Plus, I read it in the SI thing. But yeah, they literally were like, "What do you want us to look at?" And he put in a videotape that was essentially YouTube highlights. It was YouTube highlights. And so the scout was like, and he's like, I'm paraphrasing, but you effing want me to change 2 years worth of scouting of like every game I've watched of this guy, who I don't think is much better than Jeff Smoker, the Michigan State guy that we got in a fifth round grade. We've got him with a higher grade than we got Alex Smith. But you want us to change that on a hit clip of 20 highlight throws with no incompletions? You want me to use this as the grade? Get out of here. And literally, like they had to be like separated. And that's politics. That's not scouting, but there's politics, and there's a lot of that in the rooms. I mean, because we've seen. I mean, how the heck does Johnny Manziel get drafted by a Cleveland Browns organization as early as he did, when his workout, as he described on his pro day, was on Netflix, was me and
Oh,
my
I saw
teammates
that.
got drunk, and they were my receivers were all passed out, and they had to wake me up, and I'm throwing this interns and staffers on my marketing team. Like, if you're a scout, and you see that. I mean, my first thought was like, I'm getting fired. I
Yeah,
know I'm getting
man.
fired because I'm coming in. I'm going, Jimmy, or whoever it is, whoever the GM, Andrew Barry. If it was Andrew Barry, whoever it was, I'm going. We can't draft this guy in the first round. He's got to fall. There's no way. He was hungover, and his teammates were hungover. They couldn't even come out and play or practice for this thing. And you want us to pick that guy to lead this
There's
organization?
there's literally not a job in the world where you can show up to the interview hungover and they're like, this guy, I
Apparently,
like
there
what he's
is.
bringing. Apparently there is.
In Cleveland. There
Yeah.
was. And then when that didn't work out, there's some jobs where you can show up and do some things that you really might need to be in jail for. And but because of the legal system the way it is, hey, look, we'll covet him and give him a guaranteed contract. So I mean,
Yeah.
we are,
Browns, man. Track
yeah. I
record. They're
mean,
they're doing great.
I mean, and when you grow up as a Browns fan like I did with all that dysfunction, it makes it a little easier to see through the veil of things and go, how stupid can it go? Well, it can go pretty deep.
We're gonna
So
test it.
let's trust our eyes and not what people tell us sometimes.
I get it. Now I get it why you and I enjoy the draft and scouting prospects, is we have grown up as fans of franchises that have tortured us. The
Yes.
Browns and the Dolphins. Like, that's what I always tell everyone, is I loved the NFL draft as a kid because it was the greatest point of hope in the calendar year for the Miami Dolphins. And then I'd be there and just like as a kid, I'm like, okay, great. Number one overall. And I hadn't really seen much. It was like number one overall pick, Miami Dolphins. And it was one of those late night West Coast games where Matt Ryan was leading the BC Eagles back on a comeback and has some of the most amazing throws I had ever seen. And even me at like, I don't remember what I was, like 12 or something. I'm like, that guy's pretty good. We should probably draft him. And we get the number one overall pick. And I'm like, awesome, Matt Ryan. He's going to be the quarterback for the Dolphins, the new Marino. And they're like, Jake Long. Not that he was a bad player,
Right.
but like,
yeah.
man, these teams, they know how to just
Yeah.
destroy your soul.
I'll just say, when I lived in Miami from '88 till late '91, I did get to see Marino play a number of times in Joe Robbie Stadium. So I will
I
treasure
like that
that.
you called it Joe Robbie too.
Yeah,
That's
was
a good,
back in
that's
the
a good
day.
throwback.
Yep.
I had the pleasure or misfortune of becoming a Dolphins fan after Marino retired. I had heard about him as a kid and I was never into football. And I was about like 9 years old. It was 99 when he retired, or 2000. And then I became a Dolphins fan and they're like, all right, get ready to learn Damon Heward, buddy.
He'd throw
Enjoy.
he'd throw for 6,000 yards and 60 TDs in today's
Oh.
NFL.
Yeah.
I would bet money on that. I mean, I would easily bet 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. I would bet that. Even now with the umbrella coverages, I would still bet that.
Man, it's funny. The NFL has changed so much. I feel like scouting processes have changed a lot more. I know I cringed the other day, and this is just, I'm just going to give an opinion piece here when I say this. I cringed the other day seeing I can't remember what it was, like Microsoft AI or something that was like, find me a linebacker with leadership skills. And he's talking to the AI thing. And I'm like, all right, maybe we've jumped the shark a little bit. Dude, it pissed me off so much. It's like one thing when it was like organized by their 40 times. Okay, I get it. And then it's like, find me the 3 best based on leadership traits. And I'm like, no, no, let's not do that. But one thing that I know that has changed so much in terms of scouting is how much analytics will go into that, how much metrics, numbers, everything, right? And I don't think it's smart to ever ignore those things, right? Like, we do have to consider a lot of these numbers because we get historical significance and thresholds and things that we've mentioned before. What's your relationship like with analytics, metrics, trying to work that into your scouting process? Because I know there's people that'll tell me like, I'll look at it after the fact, or it'll be like maybe 10 or 20%. I've heard, you and I have both spoken with JJ Zachariason, where he's like, I'm mostly analytics and that's where I'm going to start. So what's that relationship like for you in terms of the scouting process?
Well, I laugh because I think most people think it's adversarial, like with me, with
It's
numbers,
not,
but it's
dude.
not.
It's
No,
not.
no, it's not remotely. Like as Dwayne McFarland would say after he worked with me for a few years, he goes, "Dude, what most people don't understand is that you're you're doing analytics." I'm like, yeah, you get it. Like I've never said that to anybody until he said it, but I laughed because I was like, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm Because if you look at data, where does it come from? It's tracked. Who tracks it? Human beings. How do they contextualize it? Human beings contextualize the data. So what I'm doing is I track my own data for the most part if it's not box score data. I track my own data and I contextualize it. I've given you the framework for the data. That's what the definition is. I've given you the value for the data. That's the scoring with it. I've given you a system for how that works with check different ways of going about it. So I'm using film to create my own data. And so I on the whole, the RSP is an analytical piece on film. But then when we talk about analytics in a truer sense, so that I'm not just being cute with the answer here about that, is that yeah, I mean, like I study the film and then I get the combine results. And I look at the combine results, and what I try to do is if the player's short area explosion, um, long speed, acceleration, all if they match where my thresholds are for them on those from what I've seen on film, then they keep the grade they have. Um, if they look a lot slower, then I look at the film again and I try and make sure that I'm looking for instances where I see them have to work in certain situations, like are they running to the long side or the short side of the field, and who are they trying to beat, and who is that, and where's that player, where are those players angles at, are they able to outrun them, are they able to just stay even with them, are they getting run down from behind? And I'm looking for as clear examples as I can that will show whether or not he's faster than that speed or he's slower than that speed. And I either make a slight adjustment or no adjustment at all. Or if I look at it and go, you know what? He is that slow. There's some things here. I must have missed that. I probably didn't see that the fact I probably graded that a little higher than I should have. Then I'll bring that number down some. So I will make adjustments based on that because in my how well they do it tiers, which is my overall grade for rankings, um, I have baselines for like he's got to run this speed or the equivalent of that I see on film. And I've put things in tiers like, when he gets in the open field, can he beat a cornerback who's running from the opposite side of the field to catch him? Can he
Yep.
beat one on the same side of the field that's running to catch him? How fast, how many yards do I really need him to go? Because also, that's the other thing. They're running 40-yard dashes, but there's some players who, when they hit 40 yards, they're just hitting their stride and they can pull away, but they aren't that, they can't get to that top speed that fast. So like if they run an 80-yard touchdown, they're pulling away from the fastest guy on the field, but the runway that they need to get there is a whole different story, and they may
Can
never
I
hit it.
can I tell you something? I know I promised no players. I started my first player eval yesterday,
Yeah.
and it was a fun one because he declared it was Kenyon Sadiq, and he's one of those guys that as I'm watching, I go, man, does he get faster when he's like 20, 30 yards downfield? And he really does. Because in these tight spaces, and I'm just using this as an example, not as a prospect eval.
No.
So just in case, but like when he's in these tight spaces, I'm like, huh, I don't necessarily see the athleticism there for him to make people miss one-on-one with a corner. I didn't see a lot of broken tackles. But then when I see him catch something up the seams, maybe at about 15, 20 yards downfield, and I go, holy smokes, he's running past safeties. He's a different caliber of athlete in that area. And that's where it's like, man, the analytics, the metrics will tell you he's fast, but he's fast at certain things. And like
Yeah.
that's where that context that's needed.
For sure. DeAndre Swift was a player like that. Omarion Hampton is a perfect example of that type of player where if he gets that runway, he's going to blow by corners. And that got people excited because he's probably fast after like 25 yards. but it's that
Mhm.
first 25 yards that you go, yeah, put him in a gap scheme. If you can give him that long runway and he's got good block in front of him, yay. But I see why they're bringing Najee Harris in, because he may not be super fast anymore, but he's quick and he can do the Devonta Freeman type of stuff that this guy's oversized Tevin Coleman kind of thing is kind of there. And it's not a one-to-one equivalent to players I'm mentioning there, but you could see why they were like, we're going to
Right.
pair him in a committee, and why
Yeah.
people are begging for more. And sometimes you have to pay attention and go, all right, they're probably going to try it next year when they get Greg Roman out. But there's a reason why they saw what they saw and did what they did.
Oh,
And
I'm always
yeah,
going to selfishly want more from these guys in fantasy. I'm
yeah,
always going to be
yeah,
that guy complaining because
yeah,
it's fantasy football.
right.
Okay, so Matt, I got two more questions for you. One is totally silly and non-football based at all. But the last one here is, let's say there's someone that is watching or listening this, and they have never sat down and tried to evaluate film, right? What would you say is the thing that they need to know when they sit down to do this? And I know that is a very open-ended, loaded question, but if you could say, okay, here is your starting point, plant the seed and grow from there, what would you say to that person?
Well, the joking one would be to get a pillow, because you're probably going to fall asleep and wake up and have scrawl all over your. First time I tried to scout somebody was Steven Jackson. I woke up with my cat on my lap that we started the episode talking about, the one that was fighting his way out. Yeah, on my lap asleep, and next thing I knew, the Colorado game was on as opposed to like the Oregon State game.
Yeah.
But the real answer is, I would start with a very narrow band, and I would say I'm going to watch one position, and I'm going to watch one specific thing that I have defined in a way that is either, I can define either he does it well or he doesn't do it well. And then I would try and expand on that to say, to give you tiers of how well he does each that thing if he does it well. And I would just focus on that and do that with different players and watch that and watch for that one thing. And the reason I say that is that too many people jump ahead and they want to like get to the fun part of giving an overall grade and looking for who's that special guy and all of that stuff. And that's like the Hollywood version of scouting. The real version of scouting is it's very it's mundane. It is very detailed. It is a lot of research work, doing things that going through and being, really um, looking at things up close, and it can be monotonous. And you got to see how much of a threshold for boredom you can handle and be accurate with what
Yeah,
you're
man.
doing. And so it's, because there are always been people who would say, I would love to watch football with Matt. And my wife would go, no, you really don't. You would not want to do that. And the best
You can't
example,
handle those streets.
you can't handle those streets. And the reason being is she would break it down to them and they go, oh, but the best way to do it is this. Is the reason I recommend it this way is because Russ Landy, the former Rams and Browns scout and works in the USFL, he told a story that just fits this to a T to anybody who thinks they want to scout. He had somebody approach him and say, oh, I've always been into this. I really want to do this. Do you think I could watch some football with you? He's like, yeah, are you free tomorrow? And he's like, yeah, it's Saturday morning. He's like, yeah, Saturday morning. Come here, get here at 7 a.m. I'll be watching tape, and we'll watch some players together. He's like, okay, great. So they get there. Russ, welcomes them in. They sit down. They start watching tape. They're about at 11:30. It's been 4.5 hours, and now Russ is at about like 3 minutes left in the second quarter. He's been studying a couple of players, and the guy starts talking about, well, where are we going to go to get lunch? When are we going to go do this? And Russ is like, well, I made a couple sandwiches for us. If you want one of the sandwiches, or you could call and have something Ubered or order something, have somebody deliver something if you want. But I'm planning on staying in because I got another like 8 hours that I've got to probably watch of this guy in this game. And the guy was like, yeah, I don't think this thing is for me. I think I'm going to split, And I mean, and that's like, that's the thing. It's like, there's guys I'm watching, if I watch 150 players, maybe 40 of them are going to be compelling within 3 years from now for the NFL. So that means there's going to be another 110 players that I've gone through 6 to 8 games apiece, looking at 125 criteria points, and I'm literally going, and I might know after the second game, I might be going. There's a part of my mind that it goes, this guy can't fucking play in the NFL. Like,
Right.
I'm probably not going
Yeah.
to happen. But I got 4.5 more games that I got to watch and make sure I'm not wrong about that. And sometimes I have, and I've gone, I'm glad I did this because this guy snuck up on me. Last night, I'm watching Dane Key of Nebraska, and I'm watching him, and I'm thinking, okay, your mind's going to have. That's the other thing, you is just let things float in and out of your mind. And when you have a structured process, it doesn't matter what I'm thinking as I'm watching this, because I've everything written down. This is how I'm grading it. So then when I go back and look at the total, how I felt about the player when I first saw it might not match how I actually feel about the player after I've done my analysis. So I've learned that, there's been those magical times where, like, this time probably 8 or 9 years ago, I'm recording a bunch of games, and I was getting into my office after lunch to do it, and I'm watched this guy make this incredible throw against LSU, and I go, man, that was pretty bad. Then I looked at it again, and then I watched another one, and I'm going, who is this guy? And then I look at it, Patrick Mahomes, and I go, and I literally shut off my TV, and my thought was, I'm going to want to watch every game of this guy because what I just saw was so incredible. I I want to watch this guy, but I can't. He's going to be next year. He's next year. I can't mess with that, you know. And you have
Yeah.
moments like that where when Dave Wanstead used to say, "I saw Deion Lewis in high school. I saw 2 plays, and I gave him a scholarship." I get it, because after you've looked at so many things and you have all those layers of data, those 10,000 hours you've spent, you start to certain things do register. You start to have it ingrained in you that you see some things that register quickly, but there's still the value of your process is that oftentimes you don't. So you may look at a guy like Dane Key, and I look at him and I go, yeah, he's all right. Maybe he's like kind of has that Nick Akine Westbrook thing going on where it's like he'll be in the league for a little while, and he's a really good blocker. And then I keep watching and keep watching. Next thing I know, I look at his score and I go, huh, that guy's a lot better than I thought he was. He might be one of my more underrated receivers coming into this class. I might be wrong about it, but it's like, I've had more successes than not when it comes to that kind of thing. And part of it is because when I'm studying and I'm looking at each thing granularly like this, I can let something flow into my mind and go, my first thing is like, yeah, Nick Akine Westbrook. That doesn't get anybody excited, except somebody scraping somebody off the waiver wire during a TD run, But like other, that you don't know how long it's going to last. But then at the end of it, you look at the total and you go, huh, that guy's actually, there. This guy's more compelling than I thought he'd be. And then I've got notes that I'm going, I need to watch these 2 or 3 things a little bit more detail once we see if he gets a combine invite or if he gets a pro day workout. There's a couple things I need to see because that might make a difference between me being someone who's like way out in front on him and someone who goes, yeah, he could be a nice contributor eventually. He's kind of in that range. And so those are that's part of the process. And I'd say watching it is, again, focus on one thing and really get it fleshed out. So can he do it? Can he not do it? Or then have standards. Start looking at create a standards for going, and you can use players as archetypes if you want. Like, maybe Chad Ochocinco is your top route runner. Maybe the guy below that is JSN. Maybe the guy below that, but you have to define what those differences are between those players, which means you probably should watch those guys and start doing that, which means that leads into reading books on receiver technique and understanding what those differences are. But even if you don't do all that and you try to do it before you do all the reading, you're going to discover, oh, what's the rabbit hole that I've just dove into here? And what do I need to learn next? And do you love it? The other thing you could do, and I'll say this last, is you could do what I did, of course, which was complete craziness, which is you could take a week off from work and decide you're going to try and write a book on prospects and see how many hours you can spend in a week watching watching football and doing nothing else. Um, and I locked myself into a hotel room in Athens, not far down from Weaver D's, where the REM and all that fame was, literally down the street. And I locked myself in a room, and I spent 129 hours watching film. I logged it because I had to see how long it would take for me to do this. I got very little sleep, and I thought
Brother.
I'm either going to hate this or I'm going to love this. Like, and I took a week off from work to do it, and I loved it. And I thought I've got a sickness because I love this, and I've got to keep doing it. Now I don't work that many hours anymore a week, but but I, you can do that to yourself and see just how many plates of, how many hot dogs you can eat at once. That's basically what I did. And I found that yeah, that was my hot dog eating competition talent right there.
I love it. Some people take cruises, others will go to Europe, and you're just like, give me a hotel room in Athens and a laptop and just
I
watch,
brought I brought a P
hundreds of hours of
I
prospect
brought
film.
my TiVo. I brought my like PC, physical PC. I brought my office chair from home. I mean,
Yeah.
and literally did set up
The people
shop.
in the lobby are like, what the hell is this guy
Oh,
doing?
it was they were more like those psycho hotels, that were like the flat, they were more flats. They weren't like all one
Uh,
big building. So it was lucky that, and I knew the hotel manager, fortunately. So like I told her what I was going to be doing, but it was funny because delivery people, I'd have delivery come and bring food, or after a while, I occasionally took an hour to get out and walk downtown and got
yeah.
something to eat and then went back to work. But yeah, it was nutty, but I needed to see. And for me, wasn't so much of a vacation as it was as, can I escape my corporate job? Is this something that I'm willing to go all in on with this? Let's find out, and that's what happened.
Well, there you go, guys. If you want to break into it, just find a really nice hotel and
And
lock yourself in there for a
yeah,
bit.
and see how crazy you actually are. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. The Uber Eats bill's gonna go crazy.
Yes, have an
Uh,
expense account. That's for sure.
okay, so I got my last question here for you. It's not even my question. It is actually a question from the previous guest. And this is something I like to do where guests get to pass on a question to the next one. So the last guy I had on was Tyler Brook from the Best Available show on YouTube, where he was a great guest. He decided to ask a non-football question, which 10 out of 10 questions are. But what are your favorite things to do to get away from football? We've already heard how you vacation, and it sounds glamorous. But what are the other things that you like to do when you're not dealing with football?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, my wife and I definitely love to travel. All jokes aside, but on a daily basis, I try to make time to play music. So,
I love it.
I was a jazz performance major at the University of Miami, back in the late '80s and early '90s. I used to play in salsa and merengue bands way back
Let's
when, in
go.
those days, hilariously. Um, and playing big bands and stuff like that. So I took some time away from music, a lot of years actually, and started playing again about 5 years ago. So I play the saxophone. I'm learning the electric bass. So I practice. I usually play along with jazz solos that are on YouTube, or learn or transcribe solos and learn them by ear and try to work from there. And when I do retire from this whole football thing, I'll probably be spending a good 4 to 6 hours a day playing music, and working at it. I'm really excited about that opportunity someday. It's kind of like when I was doing the call center stuff and the corporate stuff. It was more like I would love to be a writer full time. I'm starting to, and how do I get myself transitioned to that? I'm kind of in that space now where I love what I do compared to what I, and I'm going to be doing it for a while longer. But I'd like to, I think about retirement years and think, next 15, 20 years, I could see myself spending the amount of time I work on doing this, playing music. So before I go to sleep, after I watch film, I'm learning um, how to walk on the bass. Like, walking is like counterpoint basically for the harmony, and you're playing through that. So I'm learning how to walk because it kind of takes a little bit of time. So I play along with jazz standards on my iPad, and like there's a program where they have all these standards, and you basically has the lead sheet of the harmony. And so I work on that, and I have a teacher who's a um, big Dallas Cowboys fan who lives out in LA, whose mentors like Stanley Clark and John Patitucci and some really, and he's an excellent player. He plays with a Miami based trumpeter by the name of Arturo Sandoval.
Yeah.
And he plays with Arturo Sandoval. I got to go see them and actually go and hang out with the band um, last time he was in Atlanta. Um, and he heard me just because another bassist heard me playing saxophone occasionally. I put some stuff on Twitter, on Instagram, and when he liked what he heard, and he was like, yeah, the guy studies football prospects, like, he's like, you're studying some vague musician nobody heard of, and he's studying some wide receiver nobody ever heard of, and so we ended up hooking up, and I've been practicing that. So I play. So yeah, that's my passion, is getting a chance to play improvised music and learn at that. And it's a slow process. It's from where I think I could play and eventually be to where I am right now. There's a fairly big gap. Like I could probably play some gigs. I could probably play some gigs like in a band and where I have to read music but not solo. And I could probably get back to doing that in certain avenues. I'm still, that's there, but like the soloing part, I could probably play in a blues band or a funk band, and I could probably do hold up okay in some of that. Maybe not for any major recording acts, obviously, but like I think I have you always have goals, and you shoot for what your goals are, and it would be fun to be able to go to jam sessions in Atlanta and play around town with some people I know who are pros, and maybe occasionally get called to be a sub on a gig or something like that. And it might be unrealistic in my late 70s, but who knows? It might be fun someday to. So it'd be fun to be an old man and get a chance to do some of that. So we'll see.
One, I need to know when the Matt Waldman LP releases.
Never.
And
But
can we get like a cool name for it? Like something that's like a scouting term? Like
probably, yeah.
like oily hips or howitzer or something like that. We can't do a self-titled LP. It's got to be something that crosses
Yeah,
over from
yeah,
scouting.
yeah. Like something like bowler goalposts or something like that.
There we
The
go.
bowler throw, or like
Yes,
something like that. But
I love it.
I love it. Yeah, that'd be fun.
It's funny, man. My mom, I played trumpet like all throughout junior high and high school because it's like the school I went to. You had to pick something, right? You're
Yeah,
either in choir or you're in band, and all the guys were like, "Ah, we'll go do band." And I did that. And if my mom would have had her way, I would have been a professional trumpeter. So when you said Arturo Sandoval, like that's something my mom was like, "You could be like him." And I remember being like 13 and being like, "Mom, absolutely not. Like that's not in my path. Like
you
it's
you
it's
you.
okay."
It's funny to see. Like you learn pretty quickly where you are with certain stuff, and also what you're passionate about doing. Because like I remember
Mhm.
the first time I went to the University of Miami, I was an all-state musician. Like I was multiple times. I was a first chair all-state musician in Georgia, and multiple different groups that they did, and I thought I was pretty good. I was a small fish in the. I was a big fish in a small pond, and I went to the University of Miami, and I remember hearing somebody playing, and I walked through the practice rooms, and I felt like someone who was the Pop Warner All Star, who literally was trying out for the Miami Hurricanes in 1988. Okay, it
Yeah.
was like the only thing better than the Hurricanes probably in that school was that jazz program. It was insane, the people that I met there. But like to go through that and listen to them and going, what on earth am I doing here? And I remember listening to someone who literally like was trying out for the same classes I was trying out for, and he was behind a closed door, and I thought it was the professor. I thought it was the professor. And then like he got out and he was my age, and I was like, what am I doing here? And I learned a ton, and it
Nothing
was
to
a
kill the
great
confidence like that.
experience. But yeah, it was a wake up call to see that. And yeah, and that dude ended up playing, like, if you know jazz, he got to play with like Freddie Hubbard. He got to play with some, like, it would be like, getting to go, like, eventually he went and played for like the New Orleans Saints with Drew Brees. It was like that kind of thing. I saw that stuff all over the place. I played in a band. I played in school. I played in a school project where we did like just funk covers and stuff like Earth, Wind and Fire. And the lead singer has his name's Raul Madone. He has literally like been on Letterman. He's been on every talk show. He's won Grammys. He's like been on the same stage with Stevie Wonder and um
Wow.
and Erica Badu and like all these huge artists. My roommate, who I used to have to wake up for his classes, for his lesson. He was a trombone player and a keyboard player, and this band used to stay. He was a part of this band, and this band was based out of Atlanta, and they stay at our apartment on campus occasionally when they come back from South by Southwest, and they go, "Yeah, the Black Crows, they got signed. When are we going to get signed?" I mean, like, we like them, they're good, but like, when are we going to get signed? We thought we killed that show. We didn't think they killed their show as much as we did, and they got signed. And they'd sleep on my couch and hang out. And that was Collective Soul. My roommate produced their first album, was a keyboard player on it, and then ended up becoming the CEO of Virgin American Records and
Oh wow.
founded Matchbox. He discovered Rob Thomas and Matchbox 20. He
Yeah.
worked with Jermaine Dupri. He co-wrote songs with Willie Nelson. He's done like all these great, and like
That's so
he's
cool.
he's just one of many. And so I laugh, and I would literally, his trombone teacher, he would be up late, and he'd sleep through his lessons, and his trombone teacher would, like, I could hear him shouting, "Jesus Christ, Matt!" His name was Matt. "Jesus Christ, Matt, get up! You got to get your butt down here." So I would jokingly, like, at least once a month, he would sleep in, and I'd get the phone call, and I'd throw something at him because, like, we had this alarm that was a tennis ball. So whenever it would, like, you snooze,
The
you throw it up
alarm
against
is
the
the
wall.
tennis ball. Is
So
great.
yeah, so I would throw it at him, and he was like 6'5", 240 pounds. This dude, okay, like big dude, like,
Good measurables.
yeah, I'm telling you, they chased him around at Redan High School and not near Stone Mountain in Georgia. I know they chased his ass around to get him to play football, and I'd throw it him and I'd go, "Jesus Christ is on the phone. He's pissed off at you, and like, sorry anybody who's, but like, and we would laugh about it. But I mean, like, those are the types of talents that I saw, and I knew like 2.5 years in, like, I was on probation in the program, and then I got in. I worked my way into the program, and I got in, and I realized 2.5 years in, I was like, I'm gonna have to play a recital like in another year and a half. And I think about what else I'm gonna want to do, and I'm like, I'm not ready for this. Like, I know about this much, and I feel like I only have maybe this much like available that's really solid. I need to, someday I'll work at that. But so it's been a gift. So I mean, yeah, that's my whole thing, is I got back to playing, and it's a passion, and it's fun, and eventually we'll see where that goes, just for fun. If I get to continue to meet people like my bass teacher, it would be kind of a hoot to be able to go, "Y'all are football fans? Well, when next time you're in town, you can stay at my house. The only price of admission is that you got to spend an hour playing with me and teach me a lesson, and we can play through some tunes in my basement and hang out, and then it's all good." So I learn a little bit, and we have fun, and we can take turns talking football and talking about music.
Yeah, man, I love that. I love getting that glimpse into you beyond all the scouting stuff. It's just it's cool to see when someone's passionate about something. You can obviously see it through your work with scouting, but to see something else on the side, like something that there's a very rare combination of something that you can be good at that you're also passionate about, and then can create life for you, right? And one of my friends, he mentioned it to me. It's called Ikigai. It's like I'm probably butchering the way it's said, but it's a terminology for having all those things in life sort of cross paths in this nice little Venn diagram, man. And obviously it feels like that's what prospect scouting is for you, but also music. And so like I feel very lucky and very fortunate to have learned that about you,
Well, I
man.
appreciate that, man. I mean, I think a lot of us who got into fantasy football or got into football analysis probably were doing something else before we got into that. And
Yeah.
so there's probably a fair percentage of the population that is thinking about that right now, who has probably tried a lot of things, and it didn't, and it wasn't really their thing, and they're looking for that thing that's going to light them up inside. And I was kind of that person, like I went to school, I was a good student in high school, and I was a good student in college, but like I was looking for something that I was passionate about, and I couldn't find it. And it took me some time, and I went through a lot of different things in my life that I tried. I tried a lot of different things, and I would just encourage people, if you're in your like teens and 20s and listening to this for some reason, you really like football, but you're trying to figure out what you want to do. I mean, you know, everybody's situation is different, but if you have the means and the opportunity to try different things and just try it on, don't worry about failing, just try it. You'll, if you know the person, you're the person that, like, my daughter's different than me. Like, my daughter looks at my wife and I and goes, I don't want to be entrepreneurial. I don't want to try all that crazy stuff. I know what goes into that. And she's talented enough that she could do a lot of different things. She was literally months away from an internship in New York or Paris as a doing fashion design. That's what she studied at first, was fashion design. And she could sew, and she was one of the first in her school. She was one of the only people that already had like a portfolio of clothing that she had made and done all that. But she discovered, she's like, I don't want to put in the hours that like you and mom put in for the things that you did. And like, I want an 8 hour gig, and then I want to come home. That's what I want to do. And she ended up becoming a marine pilot, which is
Wow.
completely different than
Yeah.
fashion design. She became a
What a
marine pilot.
curveball.
Yeah. But now she's like finishing up an accounting degree, and she's closer to where she wanted to be, but she tried different things, and she went in different directions to learn that stuff. And I think that everything you try to learn will tie together if you're open to the experience. And all this half the stuff I that happens with my scouting that has been successful is because of everything I did with music. I mean, there's so much that ties together, and it allows me to see things with a subtlety that I wouldn't have seen if I hadn't been so intense about trying to learn music. And then the times that I felt like I was in this call center environment, and I felt like I was at a way station for lost souls, and I was one of them. Um, it taught me a ton to see things that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. So you're a product of your experiences, and I think that means you need to get as many experiences as you can draw upon. And if it means you know what you want already, good for you. But make sure you broaden your horizons some with passions and things that you love, because it will feed into the thing that you love. It'll feed into the thing that you do and make you better, and it'll make you just better overall in whatever it is you're trying to be better at.
I love that. I love that so much, man. And I'm taking all of that advice to heart as well. I know that our audience here is going to do the same. But Matt, this is now your chance to ask a question for whoever's coming on next. And like I said, does not have to be football based at all.
Well,
So what the question before this was, how would you react to someone who got their steak cooked medium well when you're on your fifth date with them? Like, it was a very intricate question. So I promise you, these questions can be quite literally anything.
my wife would make a face, and I would know that I would probably be like, I would have to do the gentlemanly thing and be nice, on her behalf, to ask for them to redo it. But okay. So anyway, joking aside, um, I'm going to ask. It's not really a football question, but it is, and that is, I want to know what position the person wanted to play as a pro football player when they were a kid, because
Ooh,
most of the people who probably going to be on this show, probably at one point, even if they knew it was unrealistic, dreamt of playing pro football. So I want to know what position they wanted to play. And it can, if you want to add the two-parter, it can be and who was it that they hoped they could be, at that position. Like, for me, I laugh because I wanted to be Ozzie Newsome, um, and I didn't get to be Ozzie Newsome the player. But I'd say that if I'm even half of what Ozzie Newsome was as a talent evaluator, I'm doing okay. So you just never know.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I remember, man, my first exposure to football was playing at school, obviously, but then, like, saying, because watching like Little Giants and seeing Madden and things come out, and I'm just like, well, I want to be quarterback. Like that's the cool position, right? And I remember the little pee wee football coach that was there when I was a kid. I was like, okay, can you do a shovel pass? And he had me like try to run an option with him, and I just could not do it for the life of me with my little hands. He's like, sorry, pal, you're not gonna be able to be a quarterback. And it was just like, it was such a funny way to just get that out of my system. And then I remember playing Madden as a kid, and Eddie George was on the cover, and I was like, oh, this guy's amazing. You know, he's unstoppable in this game. And then the Dolphins got Ricky Williams, and I'm like, oh man, okay, I want to be a running back. Turns out you've got to be fast to do that. And so that didn't work out for me. And I ended up being a fullback. And I was just like, okay, well, it's kind of like running back, just not as pretty. You just get to run into people. But that ended
Yeah,
up just
you got
being my high school.
you're like at least according to the memes I'm seeing, you're the crazy smarter version of a linebacker.
Yes.
You're like the sheepdog and they're the wolf.
Yeah.
So I've seen there's a good Instagram of like a former linebacker who runs into a former fullback, and like that there's this instant hatred between them and they don't even know why. And then they realize, he goes, you played football, didn't you? He's like, yeah. He goes, I was a linebacker. And he's like all like, you know, very machismo about being a linebacker. Like, can't you tell how good I was? And the guy's unimpressed with him. And he's like, what did you play? And he goes, I was a fullback. And then the guy's like, oh, and like, but it's like the fullback keeps getting the one up on the linebacker.
Yeah.
And he's not even trying. And then when they part company, the linebacker just starts screaming like out loud, like because he was so angry that he couldn't get the better of the fullback. So I mean,
That's
I
great.
gotta find it. I'll send it to you. But that's awesome that yeah, I loved Ricky Williams, but I wanted to be a running back too at one point. But I think for me, watching Ozzie Newsome make all these incredible acrobatic catches was like, that was easier to do than it was to run over people. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been an awesome conversation, man. I've loved having you here with me. You know what? Congratulations, Matt Waldman. You have beaten Sigmund Bloom for longest episode of the Pretend GM, and you should be very proud of this.
I'm not
You should be very, very
surprised.
proud of this.
I hope you
He
all
was in the
enjoyed this.
he was atop the leaderboard for I don't know how many months it's been since last September, man. So congratulations, you now hold that crown. Please, as we head out here, just let everybody know what you're working on, where they can find everything that you're doing as well.
Sure. You can find the rookie scouting portfolio at mattwaldman.com. It will be available for download on April 1st. I also have dynasty rankings and projection services that I do. The next update for people who purchased for 2025 will probably be within the next 5 to 6 days. And then after that, the last one will be in June for them. And if you want to order for the 2026 season, you can order at mattwaldman.com for June. The RSP, it'll be somewhere between 1,100 and 1,500 pages, most likely. It's in its 21st year of publication. It'll cover at least 150 prospects at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver. Portion of the proceeds go to Darkness to Light, an organization devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children, as well as teaching people and civic groups on how to spot and prevent the grooming habits and behaviors and how to handle it when, unfortunately, it does happen so that they don't create further scandals. We've donated approximately somewhere between $70,000 to $72,000 over the past decade and change since doing that. I will probably be doing a new charitable organization in the coming years, not because anything wrong with this one, they're great, but there's other causes there's another cause that I would like to really donate to that's also personal to me, that would be that I think that would be nice to be able to do. And yeah, so mattwaldman.com. You can find my YouTube channel, Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room, where you'll see podcasts with, Brandon Angelo, Bob Harris, and Adam Harstead. Sometimes Bob Harris, if I don't try, and I always try to Wally Pip him occasionally as he jokes. And then, of course, there's footballguys.com, where, I contribute fantasy work and rankings during, between pretty much May and early January, and there's that, and that's I think that's enough.
You're everywhere, man. Matt Waldman, an institution in fantasy football and NFL draft and football in general. And man, I can't thank you enough for joining me. The whole little scam of this podcast is that I make believe like it's for the people to learn stuff, but really I'm the one that gets to learn here like firsthand. So it's such a pleasure to do that. It's great chatting with you, man. I know the audience loved this as well. As always, I want to thank everybody for watching or listening all the way through to this episode. For myself and Matt, we thank you. I'll see you next time. Adios.